Welcome to #History. I'm Rachel.
And I'm Leah. And thank you for joining us for the second episode in our guest speaker series. Today, we are so honored to have a very special guest from the Sacramento History Museum joining us today, Susan Voskuil-Starcevich. Susan is the education manager for the Sacramento History Museum here in our hometown of Sacramento, California. So welcome to Susan. We are so excited to have you on the show and pick your brain about all things Sacramento history.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited.
We are super excited. I mean, anyone that listens to our podcast knows that we're always talking about our California and Sacramento pride. So we're super thrilled to have you here. So before we dive into all things nerdy history, Susan, we just want to hear you tell us more about yourself. How did you get into the history field? How did you get into education field, the museum field, all of that, and how it led to you working with the Sacramento History Museum?
Yeah, well, I am from the Midwest originally. I'm from Green Bay, Wisconsin.
Wow.
And so I grew up there. And I started volunteering at our local living history museum that is in Green Bay when I was pretty young. And I just kind of fell in love with that aspect of interpreting history through dressing up and doing it. And so when I went off to college, I majored in history. And when I graduated, I worked at a clothing store, as often happens with history majors, I think.
Funny, we had the exact same trajectory there. I worked in a children's retail clothing store. So.
Yep, exactly. And so, after college, I was kind of not sure what to do. So I ended up doing a few internships at museums and just really, really loving that type of work. And at one of these museums, I had a mentor who I asked, I was like, how do I do this? How do I work in a museum? And I went and got my master's degree at Eastern Illinois University in Charleston, Illinois. But it turns out what I really liked was education. And so I ended up doing more of the museum education type of work where you interpret the history or you get to interpret the history to others. And I love talking to people about history. So it just worked really well. And I ended up getting a job in Champaign, Illinois at a museum. And then my boyfriend at the time, he's now my husband, got a job in Sacramento. And so I moved with him to Sacramento and I worked for a while at a contemporary art center out here. And then I ended up finding this position at the History Museum. And I got to do I just love history. And this is such a good fit for me because I get to talk about, how important Sacramento is to not just California, but to the world history, really. So I feel very lucky to be where I am. I've been here for 4 years.
Wow. That's awesome.
Yeah.
You touched on something that I hadn't really thought about. What does it look like to be an education director at a museum? What are you doing? Are you putting together the plaques and signs that we see when we're looking at an exhibit? Or are you the one that's putting together the field trips for students that come to tour the museum? What does that particular position look like?
Yes, I'm more on the guest experience, I guess. And so my department is sort of in charge of the school field trips, we do underground tours. So if you've heard of that, we do underground tours through our museum. Of course, we have a lot of public programs that go on and we're ramping those back up, since the pandemic started. And we do just a lot of different things within the museum and outside working with different community groups. So I get to kind of run those different aspects of the museum world.
I was looking at your website just today, and you guys are doing a lot. You guys are doing so much right now. It's insane.
Thank you. Yes. We're just so happy to be open, honestly. And we're so happy to get people through our doors again. So yeah, we had to do a lot. And this time of year, it doesn't feel like it right now, but fall is a really fun time for the museum with ghost tours are coming up and things like that. So
yeah, I would echo exactly what Leah was just saying. It always feels like you all have so much going on. And one of my favorite things is I've done the underground tour. I was just telling Leah this weekend because we were in Old Sacramento where the museum is located. And I was just telling her that I've tried for the last couple of years to do one of these underground tours during the month of October, because it's like the kind of more spooky ghost tours, right? And I always miss out on tickets. Like I looked today and there is one date available that has like 3 tickets.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I always miss it.
I haven't looked today, so I didn't know it had sold that fast.
Yes.
We launched it last week.
Yeah, so it's popular.
It's always like that. I was just telling her, like I said, this weekend, and I was like, we have no chance of going this year. But speaking directly to that, can you tell us what some of the exhibits are that are at the museum right now, and also some of these events and tours that you put on, such as the underground tour, for, any of our listeners that don't know?
Definitely. So within the museum, we do kind of have sort of things are always moving, especially now that we are able to be open and people can come in and we're updating things. But currently our exhibit that is about to leave probably January or so is called our Californian Print exhibit. It's in a rotating exhibit space, and it is part of the Eleanor McClatchy collection. And Eleanor McClatchy in Sacramento history is just this amazing woman, and she is a descendant of James McClatchy, and he was he started the Sacramento Bee, or he was like the editor of the Sacramento Bee, and she became the editor eventually, the first female editor, and she was just this powerhouse. But she was very much a collector, and she loved theater. Like that was probably her main passion.
Derail this entire episode and just talk about her the whole time?
I can. How much time do we have?
Or we just make this 3 hours long.
Yeah.
Oh my God, this is so cool.
Yeah. So she collected all these things, especially about the California gold rush. And so we have just, a small fraction of her items on display right now, and they will be leaving soon, so you have to come and see them.
Noted.
But the museum itself, we do focus on early Sacramento history and the California gold rush, and we talk about, just what makes Sacramento so special and why it's endured here for such a long time, when there's been a lot of obstacles in its way, especially in the early history. So that's kind of what's going on in the museum. We also, like I said, we do the underground tours, which go out of the museum into the historic district of Old Sacramento, where there are still some pockets of underground spaces that exist. And there's not a lot of them. I think I've actually heard this before, that there's a tunnel system in Sacramento, and it's not true. I hate to burst that bubble, but it's not true. There are still some underground spaces that haven't been destroyed from construction and different things, and we bring you through them, and we talk about why the city had to raise itself out of the floodwaters and how Sacramento endured. That's probably our most popular tour. We also have an after-hour tour that is winding down. We usually have like one special kind of spiritualism after-hour tour in October, and that one is like the name implies, it's after hours, and it's kind of the sassier side of Sacramento history. Yes. It's I think it's 18 and over, 21 and over, I can't remember. And so we talk a little bit more about some of the things that we wouldn't go into, the PG-13 things, I guess.
Yeah. Okay, we're gonna have to do that before it.
Yeah,
I know. I'm crazy fascinated.
Oh,
that
yeah,
sounds amazing.
It's really fun. That one's a good one. They're all good ones. They're amazing. And we do a paranormal investigation tour where we do different sites. My favorite is actually the museum.
Because it's haunted?
Yeah. Well, the museum itself is a reconstruction of the original building that was here. And the original building that was here did have executions that took place in it. So
I did not know that.
Yes, I know. It's really interesting. So there have been like news articles. There was one in 1913 that was talking about how haunted the original building was, and that's the site at least that we're on. So we get like our equipment, and we do, it's a history tour, but we also have paranormal equipment. So it's a lot of fun. Yeah,
appeasing all of the crowds. I love it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think we have our ghost tours, which is different than the paranormal. The ghost tours is where we talk about real stories in history that happened here in Sacramento, and it's how somebody died or there was some accident of some sort. And we kind of recreate that. And our guests like walk through these little vignettes and the ghosts tell their story.
This is so cool.
Yeah. So, and of course we're doing our school programs are ramping up again. And oh my gosh, we just have a lot of fun.
This makes me want to take an entire week off of work and just like hit up every single tour,
Perfect.
Right?
Come on down. Come on down.
Okay, well, before we set you loose to tell us the main story that you came here to tell us and the listeners, we thought it would be good to do a super quick, just like overview, which I know is very hard.
It is hard.
Of Sacramento, especially for those listeners who aren't as familiar with it. We have listeners as far as the UK, Australia, all over the place. So I know one of the things I find most fascinating, and you kind of alluded to this talking about the underground tours, is the flooding of Sacramento and how that affected the formation of the city and how the city is laid out today. So can you maybe start us at the very beginning, and then how did we get to where we are now, and like the broad strokes of Sacramento and how it's developed into what we know and love today?
Definitely. Well, I should definitely start by saying that the land that we stand on is originally Nisenan land, that it is Native American land who were here for thousands of years before anybody else came here. And one of those first non-Native people that came to this area was John Sutter, who, if you're from Sacramento, you know about Sutter. And the story goes that when John Sutter arrived at the confluence of the Sacramento and the American rivers, which is pretty much where my museum is here. It's in Old Sacramento. It's where the original confluence of these rivers was. He decided that this area definitely would flood. And so he wasn't going to build his fort here. So he moved 2 miles inland and he built his fort over in that area of Sacramento. Now, we do like to say that Sacramento was built at the right time in the wrong place. It was built at the right time because of the California Gold Rush and in the wrong place because of these two rivers that flood every single spring. And so the California Gold Rush begins when James Marshall at Sutter's Mill up in Coloma discovers a nugget of gold on January 24th, 1848. And even though he and Sutter try and keep this quiet, Sam Brannan finds out there's lots of legends and myths around these people, but Sam Brannan finds out. He ends up going to San Francisco, buying every single bucket he can find and pick he can find. And once he's bought every single store out, he runs up and down the street yelling, gold, gold, gold in the American River. And then if he buys a bucket for 10 cents, he sells it for $20, right? So he becomes California's first millionaire. And one of the interesting and important things about Sam Brannan is that he owned a big part of land and buildings here at the confluence of the Sacramento and American rivers. So in 1850 or 1851 and 2, it like flooded every single spring. And people were and there was a great fire, the Great Conflagration, and people were like, why did we build the city here? What are we doing? And so, Sam Brannan in particular, and there are, of course, other players in it, say, no, we are going to change the landscape to make it work for us. And so eventually they raise the levees at that time and make it work until 1860. And in 1860, December, in fact, and then into January 1861, it starts raining and it doesn't stop for like 40 or 50 days. And it creates this huge inland lake that runs from like Bakersfield all the way up to like Redding. I mean, it's enormous. And Sacramento is completely underwater. Wow. And so the city decides to come up with a 3-pronged plan. They are going to raise the levee even higher. They are going to move the American River. They're actually going to move the river.
Oh my God.
And they are going to raise the buildings. And in this way, they are going to overcome Mother Nature and Sacramento will thrive. And it takes a long time, but that is what they did.
Can I ask, so they just were so determined to keep Sacramento exactly where it was, I assume just because of the ports and like the easy access with the rivers, right? But it just seems crazy.
I really think it was more about like who owned the buildings and these kind of powerful people in Sacramento and who had the money at that time, because why else would you move an entire river?
Right.
But And I mean, there was legitimately buildings and whatnot at that time in this area. So to move everything would have been difficult, but maybe a smarter move.
Yeah, I mean, it feels less difficult to physically move versus shifting the path of a giant river and raising buildings up. I don't know. That's just, in my mind, my logic says the second plan is much harder.
It's how Sacramento gets one of its many, many nicknames, which is the Indomitable City. And they just have this indomitable spirit and they can overcome anything. And they do. And so in the later part of the 1860s and then into the 1870s, the railroad, the Transcontinental Railroad, comes to Sacramento. And after the gold rush is kind of over, Sacramento has its second gold rush, which is, and I'd say that in quote, second gold rush, because it's agriculture. And they discover that the land that is around here is amazing to grow on. And so it thrives. And I mean, not to skip over, over 100 years of history, but here we are today. and
here we are.
And here we are. Exactly. In a terrible heat wave. But
yeah, there's no river flooding today.
No.
I think one of the most fascinating things I learned when I was on that underground tour with the Sacramento History Museum was that these buildings were raised while people were still living in them and businesses were still being operated. They would just shift it like a quarter turn obviously, Susan, you know exact details. What is it? Like a quarter every hour or something like that?
Yeah, exactly. Very, very slowly. And then you check and make sure everything's level. And once you do that, you can do another little quarter turn. And then keep going very, very slowly.
That's just wild.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing, though, that they figured out how to do all this and raised like so many of the buildings. I forget how many, but oh my gosh, they really did just raise the city.
That's fascinating. If anyone is local to the Sacramento area or is traveling through, definitely check out those underground tours.
I think one of the reasons why people think Sacramento just has this tunnel system is because the business owner was in charge of raising their own buildings, right? And then the city was in charge of raising the street, but it kind of left this gray area of sidewalk. They sort of just put a new sidewalk on top of it to connect these two. So you might have to go down a ladder from the street, cross the sidewalk, and then go up a ladder into the business. And it creates all sorts of silly stories. If you go on our after hour tour, you can hear some of them because you can imagine this is the 1860s and the women's fashion at the time was the hoop skirt, and having to go down and back up and everything on these ladders caused just chaos, just a lot of chaos.
That is so fascinating. This stuff is so cool to me. So I think, Leah and I both being Sacramento natives, a lot of our education had to do with the California gold rush. And we were just talking about how, we both did field trips where we mined for fake gold glitter pretty much, right?
Amazing.
It's amazing. Mm-hmm. But so there's lots of Sacramento and California history that we do know, but something we know nothing about that you introduced to us is something that came out of the California State Senate in the 1850s that may or may not have resulted in a duel or something. Anyway, I'm just going to hand the mic over to you to tell us all about this affair.
It's a really amazing story and it's complicated. So bear with me because politics in the 1850s is something else. So we'll go through it. And there's just it was so funny because I was doing some extra research and then you probably know that once you start going down one tunnel here, you are suddenly down the rabbit hole and you're and how do I get onto this page?
We're very familiar with the rabbit hole.
Yes. And it's this is a story that kind of ends in a duel. And I just thought that the duels were maybe more, or I guess less common than they actually were. Yeah. So people are just having duels left and right. It's crazy. But yes, so we call this, and we tell this story more on the After Hours tour, but we call this the Scarlet Letter story because there is a letter involved that anybody who touches it has a terrible fate, essentially, that happens to them. But to kind of set the scene, I want to make sure that everyone knows that we're talking about politics from 160 5-ish years ago, and it is very different than politics today. And things that like we would just say is so corrupt today was probably still corrupt back then, but like was slightly more acceptable.
Yeah, totally.
And even the political parties were so different than it is today. You know, it's had 165 years to grow. So it's like, it's crazy. We're going to be talking about the 1850s in California, and California became a state in 1850.
Yeah.
So a young state. And when it joined, it was a free state. Mm-hmm. And I say free in quotation marks because that could be its own podcast talking about why California was not, in fact, a free state. And when I say free, I mean free from slavery. So when it joined the Union, it was not a slave state. However, you know, when gold was discovered, people came from everywhere to look for gold and become rich overnight. And a lot of these people who were from the United States and from the southern states in particular, they would bring slaves with them in order to mine gold. And it just caused this uproar, of course, but not in the way that you might think. It caused this uproar because, you know, people who didn't have slaves were like, hey, they have extra labor that they aren't paying, and this is an unfair advantage to them. So they were not like morally opposed, mm-hmm. which is awful and terrible, but they were opposed. And that was one of the reasons why California was brought in as a free state, but like, I think for the wrong, like moral reasons, you know?
Mm-hmm. It's like how Oregon, we just had an episode talking about Oregon and their racist history essentially. And it's the same thing. Yeah. They were technically a free state, but it wasn't really for the right reasons. It was actually because they just didn't want any African Americans or anybody of color in Oregon at all. So
mm-hmm. That's absolutely echoed here. Our first governor, Peter Burnett, was very interested in making California a free state, but free from anybody of color.
Yeah.
It wasn't about slavery.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, it's wild, right? But anyway, so 1850s politics, you have the like collapse of the Whig Party, and then you kind of have the Republican Party just forming toward the end of the 1850s. And the Democrats are already, they exist, but very different than what we would call Republican and Democrats today. The word is the same, but mm-hmm. we wouldn't even recognize.
That's always one of the most fascinating things to me too, is just seeing the progression of these parties, right? The Republican Party was the more progressive, in today's terms, maybe more liberal party.
Oh yeah, definitely.
In the 50s, 60s and onward.
Definitely. So you have the Democrats, and there's two main factions of Democrats. And they are anti-slavery and pro-slavery. And so they're called the chivalry Democrats, who are the pro-slavery. And this is kind of a silly name. They're called the Mudsills, the Mudsill Democrats. And this is a derogatory term. The Mudsills, it was used in this terrible speech, like, don't go and read it. You'll be so angry afterwards. That was used essentially, a Mudsill, like, a mudsill is literally like a piece of wood that helps hold up the foundation of a building. If you know anything about construction, right? A mudsill is this like kind of bottom piece, but it's very important.
Okay.
And in this speech, they say like the mudsills are the people, the slaves, that there always has to be this bottom kind of rung of people in order to serve, I guess, this upper part of people. I know it's not good. And so what happened was they took this derogatory term and they embraced it. And they said, yeah, we're the mudsills. We are, you know, the people who hold up this society, and we're the majority. And we, you know, and so they really embraced it. And they were the anti-slavery part of the Democrats. So you've got the chivalry, which they call themselves the Shiv, which nice. The Shiv Democrats, which is so weird. It is the Shiv and the Mudsills. So that's what we'll call them because it's just very silly and I love it. So you've got these two. They're both Democrats, but they are very different things. Like, I think they'd be very different political parties today.
Yeah.
And when California became a state, they had, you know, senators, of course, that went and represented California in Washington, D.C. But at the time, you literally pick straws on who would get like the short senatorial term, because they can't be at the same time, right? But somebody had to get the short straw and have a shorter term so that they were more spread out.
Wow.
So the original senators from California were John C. Fremont, who got the short straw. He got the short one. And a gentleman named William Gwynn. So William Gwynn was one of the first senators from California. And he's an interesting guy. He actually grew up in Mississippi. So I think you can probably guess which side of the Democrats he was on.
Yeah.
He was a shiv. Yeah. And I don't know. It's just so weird to me too. Like even the word chivalry, like what it probably meant to them.
Right.
Yeah. And he either owned slaves or he married into a slave owning family. And he actually moved to California. I read something that said that he actually moved here because he wanted to become a senator, and he couldn't do it in Mississippi, although he held like different offices. But he really wanted to because his wife threw like really great parties. And so he wanted to like be a senator and kind of live that lifestyle.
Those are very interesting motivations.
There's a lot of power there too. And so, yeah, but so he gets the longer term of the senatorship, I guess, at the time, and goes to D.C. And he actually becomes somewhat close to the president who at the time was Buchanan. And so once Fremont, though, who got the short straw, when his term has ended, he goes for re-election. He does not get reelected. And you know what? I should also clarify that when I'm saying reelected, this is not a popular election. Okay. Senators at this time were elected by the state legislature. It wasn't by the people. That wasn't until the 17th Amendment in 1913 that senators were elected by the people.
Yeah.
So like if you had influence in the state legislature, you would probably get elected. It's total power.
Yeah.
Just, dynamics there. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah. I feel like if we were going to super dive into just background of politics and how elections and everything worked at this time, that would be 90% of the episode.
Oh my gosh. I know. You can get really sucked down in this because even just like these silly names, I like the Mudsills and the Shiv, like you go down these rabbit holes of like, why is it called that? Oh my gosh. It's just wild. So in comes another gentleman, David C. Broderick, and he becomes the next California senator. Broderick is actually from New York, and he had run for office there. He did not win, and he ended up coming up to California in 1849 for the gold rush. He was a 49er. The way he kind of came into power before becoming a senator is iffy. He like minted gold coins, but they contained less gold than their face value. So if he like minted a $10 coin, it actually contained $8 in coin, and then he kept the extra. So that's how he got really rich, which like kind of smart, but also
I'm a little impressed, but also no.
Yeah, I know.
But also that's bad.
That's how he got power. He became a state senator in 1850. And so then in 1851, I mean, it's just wild, this story. He became the acting lieutenant governor for a year and had political control in San Francisco. And he became super notorious for his corruption in there. And like, he was really involved with like vigilante groups, which was pretty common in California, I guess in general, these vigilante groups until like a more formed government came into being. But he had like a lot of power. And during that time, he became friends with like some really interesting folks. And eventually, though, he does become a state senator from California for the federal government. At the end of Gwynn's term in 1855, Broderick really tried to prevent Gwynn from being reelected. And there's a lot of reasons for this, right? He actually kind of draws it out for a couple of years. Like it didn't like happen overnight either. And Gwynn and Broderick, even though they were both Democrats, they just did not get along at all. And they would have these like debates and they would fight each other, but it wasn't in person. And so it was like they would say something about the other one. It would be written in a newspaper. And then the other person would read what this person had said about them and then like have a rebuttal. And like that's how these debates came back and forth. But they didn't talk about like problems at the time. They talked about how terrible the other person was.
Yeah. This feels kind of equivalent to a Facebook post that everyone gets to see that you're debating back and forth on, where it ends up totally losing the point of the conversation in the first place.
Exactly. It just became about like, it became very personal.
For sure. Yeah. I feel like anytime I read these, more slanderous election campaign stuff from 100 years ago, all of the slanderous comments are about like how ugly the guy's wife is or something like that, right?
Like, or he just bought this hat and it's terrible,
Right.
Sounds like a really bad tweet today. That's kind of what it sounds like.
But like fundamentally, these guys were so different in their beliefs that it's crazy to me that they were part of the same political party, even though different factions. And so they should have been having much better debates about issues at the time because they had very different viewpoints on these issues. But that's not what happened. And I think too, like, so we move a little bit more forward in time. It's 1857 or 58. And, you know, the United States is kind of hurtling toward a civil war, right? And so that's also like all these things that are going on. And many people, I think so many people think that California is so far away from the Civil War, and it's not.
Yeah.
Right. There was so many people here in California who were willing to, they wanted to divide California into a southern and a northern. Actually, that's like still a problem today. Some people have that. But they wanted the South to be slaveholding. But it was really for like economic power. They were also going to like reroute the railroad into Southern California, I mean, all this stuff. And so it was very much not removed from the Civil War, even though we think of that as like on the East Coast and whatnot. But these are very real issues.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you're talking about this because it's something that comes up on our podcast all the time, like of how California does have that more progressive reputation because of where we are now politically and, you know, being more liberal, more progressive. So we tend to neglect or just don't even know about California's also very racist history.
Controversial.
Yes.
Controversial.
Yes.
Totally.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh. That could be like a thesis though. I mean, there's so much there. It's wild. So, okay. So we've got these two who are debating, but they're not debating about anything of
substance,
super relevancy. They're just kind of being mean to each other. Yeah, exactly. And I know, like, you know, there's the famous debates between like Abraham Lincoln, right, and Stephen Douglas, who very much did talk about like the substance, the things that were important to the time. And that's what was written in the newspapers. And I mean, there's like reasons why Abraham Lincoln was elected eventually to president, because it wasn't just like name calling and everything. Side note, Abraham Lincoln himself too was involved in like a duel once, although he was talked out of it.
Yes.
So we're about to get to the dueling parts.
Ooh,
but
so excited.
Yeah. I know. It's funny too. I will say this is not a duel between Gwyn and Broderick.
Oh.
Okay. But I know you think like that's how we're going, but it's not. But Gwyn wasn't actually a part of two duels. One ended before it started. The other one, they both shot. They both missed and a donkey died.
Oh my God.
Well, that's just unfair.
Also, like, you have to have really bad aim.
Yes.
Really bad aim.
A donkey on accident?
It's just like
horrible. But also, why is this so common? You're like, oh yeah, he was in this duel and this guy was in actually multiple duels. And this guy, like, why is this a common practice? Why are we having duels every day?
This is like how they dealt with their emotions, right? I don't even know it because like they're slinging so many mean things to each other that are being written up in the newspapers and whatnot that I'm surprised there wasn't a duel between these two, because usually that's like my honor.
Right.
Come duel me because you've hurt my honor here. But I mean, dueling was not legal at the time either.
Well, in Jersey it was.
Everything's legal in Jersey. I think for people that have studied history, something that can be disheartening a lot of the time is feeling like we haven't progressed much.
Right.
The lack of progression in a lot of regards. So at least hearing this bit, that now I would never assume that like two people stopped talking because they engaged in a duel. Rather, they stopped talking because the Facebook comment thread got a little too heated. So while that is a problem in and of itself, at least we've progressed to where we're not missing when we're trying to shoot each other and shooting a donkey instead.
Yes. Innocent donkeys.
Right.
I know.
Lives are at stake, people.
Exactly. You think only you will be hurt? Oh, that's not true. Okay. So they're debating. Eventually, there is an election, and it's a state legislature that decides who the senator is. And it's really between like these two people. And what's happening is these two people get like a deal from Broderick. Or essentially, Broderick's like, okay, I'll throw my support behind you if you give me, if you give up all of your federal patronage privileges. And this is like a big deal, right? This is like the things that you get to appoint. Okay, so you can appoint who you want, and that person will support you. So that's what a federal patronage privilege is, I guess. And Broderick essentially says, I will totally support you, but you have to give this up. So one of these gentlemen is just like, how dare you? I know my honor, absolutely not, does not, say we shall duel. But the other person is Gwyn. And Gwyn says, okay, I will do this. But the story of how this happens is that, okay, there's two buildings here in Old Sacramento. There's one that's the Magnolia Hotel, and it actually doesn't exist anymore. It's a pit, which is not really a pit. It was actually the original level of the city. And then there's the Orleans Hotel. And this is where people set up their political offices, their different like parties. So in the Magnolia Hotel is Broderick. That's the Mudsills. And in the Orleans is the Shiv Democrats.
And is the Orleans Hotel still there? I know, a lot of that's been like reconstructed.
Yes, that one is in fact still there.
Wow.
Yeah, I know.
In Old Sacramento.
Yeah, it is. Isn't that cool?
That is so cool. And I'm so sad that Leah and I were just in Old Sac this last weekend, and I wish I had known this a couple days ago. I would have totally checked it out.
That's okay. You'll come back and you and I will do a tour. It'll be great. And I can show you where the pit is that that's the old Magnolia Hotel that doesn't exist anymore.
Awesome.
And that one's actually got some great stories. The Magnolia Hotel was known for, it had like a saloon on the first floor, and it was really known for getting snow from the Sierras and putting all of their like bottles in the snow. And that was like their thing when people would come in. It's like the Sierra snow. I don't know. I just love it. I love a good like niche thing,
Totally.
So above that is where Broderick had his political office. And I'm going to actually read a little excerpt that explains how this went down in the middle of the night.
Okay.
So it says, at about midnight of the same evening, Senator Gwyn, dressed in black and accompanied by a single companion, descended the back steps of the Orleans. Passing through a courtyard and along the alley which ran to J Street, they continued on, unnoticed, to the rear arm of the L of the Magnolia. At a back door, they were quietly admitted by Colonel A.J. Butler, who led them up a few steps to number 6, Broderick's room. So what the two discussed behind closed doors, no one knows, right? But it's like the room where it happened.
The room where it happened.
Exactly. But from this meeting comes out a scarlet letter. This is the scarlet letter. And it was signed by Gwyn saying he would give up those federal patronage privileges, and Broderick would put his support behind Gwyn. And Gwyn, remember, he really wanted to be senator. His wife throws such good parties. He's got to be a senator.
So silly.
I know it is. So like, I think Gwyn was kind of like willing to do a lot in order to get this back again. However, when pressed, of course, Gwyn just vehemently denies signing this letter, and they like denounce each other once again. But he does in fact get elected. Like Broderick does put his support behind him, and he gets elected. And from an article in the Los Angeles Herald in 1889, it said the letter seemed destined to act as a talisman of evil to every man into whose keeping it fell. And it really did just have this like black mark on it, right? At least 3 people died who had held it at one point. There was last name Ferguson. His first name is Ipsy Doodle, which is definitely a nickname.
Stop.
And I tried to figure it out.
Stop.
What?
Ipsy Doodle. Yeah.
Oh my God.
I tried to figure that one out, and it didn't go all the way down that hole.
Oh my God, that is fabulous.
Yeah. So Ipsy Doodle Ferguson had it in his possession. And do you want to know how he died?
They meant to kill the donkey and they hit him on accident.
It was a duel. He died in a duel. Yeah.
Of course it was.
I don't think in this case it didn't like ricochet off the donkey or anything like that. But of course, yeah, it was a duel.
Of course.
And then there was James S. Still, who died suddenly and from some mysterious cause. And that's like what was written in like the newspaper. But I actually found like something that said he'd been sick for a while. So I don't know about that one, but we'll go with it. And then of course there's Broderick himself, David C. Broderick. So should we get into Broderick's fate?
Please.
So remember how we said that he was like in political power in San Francisco, but he was really corrupt and he was very involved with like vigilante justice. So at that time in his life, he became really good friends with another David, David S. Terry, and I'll probably just call him Terry and Broderick, but Terry's his last name, not his first. Okay. By all means, Terry is a terrible person. Like, he is not a very likable guy. Now, the one interesting thing here, and I have to tell this story because it's fascinating and involves like buried treasure. Terry was, he came to California in 1849, like everybody else did, and he ended up becoming a lawyer. And then eventually he becomes a judge, and he becomes actually a Supreme Court justice in California. Okay. So and eventually, actually, too, he's the Chief Justice for the Supreme Court of California. So he sees a lot of cases, and his most famous one is the Widow Sanchez case. And Widow Sanchez, she was a widow of a wealthy rancher, and she was being cheated by local authorities, specifically the Sheriff Roach. His last name is literally Roach. And Sheriff Roach has stolen her money because he said that her husband had like wanted him to take care of it or to, I don't know, entrust it to him. Okay. Not the case, right? She's like, give me back my money. And so Terry and another vigilante, they kidnapped the sheriff.
Oh my
and
God. Why is this just commonplace daily occurrences? What is happening?
It's just early California. And they hold him until he agrees to release the widow's gold. Well, the sheriff, he like pays this guard where he's being held to go and tell his brother-in-law in like, I think it was around Monterey, to hide the gold, right? Like bury the gold, hide it. And so then he tells them where the gold is because he knows that it'll be gone by the time that they find it and he'll be released. So they do release him and they go, but his brother-in-law did in fact go and like rebury the gold and died like the next day because he was in a bar fight. And so they don't know where this gold went. There's like hidden gold out there somewhere, and it's this Widow Sanchez's gold. And I tried to look up if this was ever discovered, and no.
We going on a treasure hunt.
Yeah. You said near Monterey? Let's go.
Exactly. What are y'all doing this weekend? Because even if we don't find the treasure, at least we can hang out at the beach. It'll be a good weekend regardless.
Perfect. I love it. Yeah. It's not wild though.
So like, wild.
This is the kind of thing, I guess they, and these two were like really just, they were really tough guys. You know, I think Broderick was a firefighter at one point, and so they were like very much brawlers, right? They're like, yeah, you got something to say to me, say it to my face. And so that's how they dealt with all of their problems. So he gets involved with the vigilante committee with San Francisco when his buddy Broderick is kind of in power there. And so they're actually really good friends for a while. But eventually he has a falling out with Broderick. And it's because, again, of these things that they say about each other. Now, you might be able to guess too, Terry is very pro-slavery, very pro-slavery. Yeah. And of course, Broderick is not. And so I think that's probably very much where the falling out began and ended, maybe.
The root.
Yeah. And you know what? I think there was like a quote, and I think it was published where Terry said that Broderick was Frederick Douglass's slave or something. And it was like this really mean thing that he's telling his friend or calling his friend, and it's published, and Broderick is like, how dare you? Yeah. So they have this terrible falling out, and Broderick and him, they decide to have a duel.
As one does.
Terry, like, he is so ruled by these like emotions, and they really do. I mean, they were just flinging things back and forth at each other. He resigned as Chief Justice in order to go do this duel. Like,
what?
He was like,
wow,
it's that serious.
Yes, that serious.
Wow.
So the duel, they They actually tried to have the duel at one point, but the cops were like tipped off, and so they weren't able to have it the first time. So they rescheduled it, and they moved it outside of San Francisco city limits by Lake Merced, right by like Daly City. And actually, this place still exists. You can totally go there, and they have like stones on the site where each of them stood during this duel. It was, this duel has the nickname "The Last American Duel." I mean, it was a big deal.
Fascinating. Is that because everything's legal in Merced, or?
Yes, as everyone knows, just by the lake. The duel happens on September 13th, 1859. So 59. And what happened was like Broderick won the coin toss, so he gets to shoot first or something. I'm not sure exactly how duels work, but Terry got to decide what the weapon was, and he decided on his own guns. And I guess they're like hair trigger guns. And really, I don't know anything about guns, but they're very sensitive. Okay. And Terry knows this and is probably used to working with his own guns. Broderick is not. And so there's probably not a whistle involved, but I don't know. When they count to 3, they are going to shoot at each other. Broderick raises his arm and the gun goes off, and he ends up shooting the ground like a few feet in front of him.
Okay.
And the legend goes that he did that on purpose, right? That he didn't want to hurt his friend, his old friend.
Sure.
But that's probably not actually the case. Like, probably he just, accidentally hit the trigger and it went off. And that was that. He had one shot and he missed it. So, well, Terry, however, did not miss. He hit his mark. He shot Broderick in the chest. And Broderick unfortunately suffered. He died a couple days later. And
oh, geez.
Yeah, it wasn't good. And it was at this house, like pretty near there. And I guess this house is haunted now by Broderick's ghost. Allegedly, his last words were allegedly, "They have killed me because I was opposed to a corrupt administration and the extension of slavery." Which, how composed do you have to be on your deathbed?
I'm not trying to be a hater here, but that sounds a little bit like some revisionist history there that I'm going to write down what I would like my last words to be. And if you could just tell everyone that that's what they were, that would be lovely.
Just slip that in there. Totally. Yeah. Absolutely. Then what happens is, so Broderick dies. At his funeral, there is a Edward Baker. Edward Baker is really good friends with Abraham Lincoln. He lived in Illinois. He was from Illinois. And he has this eulogy. And this eulogy for Broderick goes on for an hour. And there is not a dry eye in the entire place, right? He just talks and talks about how amazing Broderick was and how he was killed because he was against slavery and we have to, uphold him. So he's absolutely made a martyr in this eulogy to the cause, even though if we think back, like he had some corrupt things, but he was anti-slavery. So absolutely. And I mean, the words that Baker uses, they are flowery and they are just they're really beautiful. I mean, honestly, who wouldn't want to have these kind of things said about them, right? In their own eulogy here.
For sure.
And I have a little bit here. It says, he goes, "Citizens of California, a senator lies dead in our midst. He is wrapped in a bloody shroud, and we to whom his toils and cares were given are about to bear him to the place appointed for all the living." I mean, it's that kind of language, right?
Wow. So they made him a martyr.
Yes.
Despite the fact that it was kind of more of a petty thing.
Yes, absolutely. And I mean, it could not have gone better for California in this instance, where he's very much made a martyr to the cause, to the Union cause. And we're hurtling toward the Civil War by this time. It's 1859. It's the end of 1859. And so, there's a lot of other things at play in our country. And so William Gwynn, for example, who is still senator and has just kind of moved off to the side. He is a senator. He is very pro-Confederacy. He meets with some of Lincoln's cabinet. And in 1861, I think he tours some of the southern states and tries to be hey, maybe we shouldn't secede from the Union. But he ultimately fails. And he comes back to California, and everybody is so against the Shiv Democrats at this point. They're all for the Mudsills. They're all for, anti-slavery. And so this eulogy and Broderick's life is very much put on this pedestal for the Union, for the movement. And And like Gwynn was not reelected. In fact, the Shiv Democrats like never get power again, I don't think, in California. So it's really pretty interesting how this all played out.
It's so interesting.
Yeah. So that's the story of the Scarlet Letter, and everyone who touched it,
mysteriously,
or not so mysteriously, finds their end.
I was going to say maybe they were just living in the 1800s. I feel like that's kind of
in the 1800s, where if you had a stomach ache, it did mean you were dying the next day.
Yes, indeed. It's gonna be rough.
That is so fascinating. And you know what I love about that too is, don't you find all the time in history this one event occurred that shouldn't really have had the weight that it did have to it, but it ended up kind of catapulting a movement like that. It's just
the butterfly effect.
Totally. It's so fascinating. And I wonder if Broderick, I mean, I'm sure he had no idea that his death would really propel and solidify this movement for truly, I mean, the entire state of California.
Yeah, I know. Right. And it certainly wasn't like his goal. I mean, he literally just wanted power. And I love the idea of these men, like in the dead of night, just going through the back door of these hotels to meet with each other. But then it just moves into something much, much bigger. And it's wild to see that in hindsight. But at the time, it was very much just like a power thing. They just wanted to appoint people, the people that they wanted.
Yeah. Egos at play for sure.
Do we know where this letter is now?
I think it was destroyed. Okay. I don't think it still exists.
Yeah, they were like, this is cursed. Let's cursed. Burn this.
How many people have to die? Exactly. No, I know.
That is fascinating.
Cool, yeah. Well, I think before we wrap things up, do you have any other quick tidbits about Sacramento history or California history in particular you'd love to share with our guests, since you are the expert here? I don't want to put you on the spot. No pressure.
Oh my goodness. Sacramento has such an interesting history. I really think people should go out and explore the city. If you're here in Sacramento, definitely go to some of the places that you haven't gone before and learn a little bit about your city and where you come from, because you're part of its history. And I think it's really important to understand your own community here. But there's so many cool things.
You all are so great with your social media.
Oh, yes. I do want to talk about your social media.
Yeah.
You guys are huge.
I
know. Especially, what's his name? The
Howard, the printer.
Howard, the print press guy. Yeah, I love it.
Yes. I mean, maybe that's a fun little tidbit about Sacramento's history. We're called the graveyard of newspapers because so many people came here and started a newspaper and then had no idea how hard that actually was. And so some before they even had their first print didn't even just collapse.
Wow.
So there were so many, and we have a historic print shop here in the museum. And one of our amazing volunteers, Howard, who has been here for over 25 years, he is our printer, and he has a really large following on TikTok in particular.
Yeah, they love him on TikTok.
Yeah, it's short form videos where we talk about something very specific, either about what printing was like in the 1850s, 60s, or something more new, but using kind of a very old technology. So yeah, I know. If you're on TikTok, come and follow us because we have a lot of fun.
Yeah, give a shout out to your TikTok handle.
At Sac History Museum. Check us out. But we do a lot of things, and if TikTok's not your thing, which it's definitely not, buddies, that's okay. Check us out on YouTube, on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, wherever you like to get your printer news.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much again for coming and joining us today. It was really great having you, and we know one of the industries that struggled the most as a result of the pandemic is the events, tourism, museum field. So we're very happy to see you all still thriving. So what can we and our listeners do to better support the Sacramento History Museum.
Oh, that is so nice. Thank you. Yeah, the best thing that you can do is come through our doors. We want to see you. So come on down and check it out and come learn something new. But if you don't live here, go see your local museum, because trust me, they want to see you so bad. And, we do a lot of tours, of course, if you want to come in and go on one of our underground tours and learn about that, that's great too. But we just want to see your face through our door. That's all we want.
We can do that. We can make that happen.
100%. Thank you so much again, Susan. Seriously, it was so nice to meet you. And we love just more Sacramento history representation on the podcast. So it was so awesome having you, a total expert in the field. It's great to hear from you. And we would love to have you again to learn more nerdy Sacramento history.
Yes,
I would love that. Amazing.
You are new to the Hashtag History podcast, come follow us over on Instagram. You can find us there at #history_podcast and on TikTok at #history, all one word.
We are not as great on our TikTok as the Sacramento History Museum.
Not at all. I think we have a total of five posts.
I like that you left that crazy vague, like 5 followers, 5 likes, 5 posts. It's 5 all the way across the board. We have
5 across the board.
We have 5.
Just 5.
We are available on all podcast platforms, and we would love it if you join the Hashtag History Podcast fam by subscribing to us on whatever podcast platform you use. Share about us with your family and friends, and then give us a rate and review.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks, Susan.